Reasonable Americans will and do believe that Justices Thomas and Alito are prone and subject to corruption, that the institution failing to punish them is broken, and that consequently their impeachment is a constitutional imperative and our congressional duty. Instances like these and misconduct like that of Alito's and Thomas's are precisely why the framers gave us the tool of impeachment. Corruption without consequence infects all it touches.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
I mean, sure, it's a little suspect that Clarence Thomas failed to disclose millions in gifts and took secret, unreported trips to Russia aboard a yacht and to one of Putin's palaces, but it could be worse. You could be running for president while alluding to Russia as we.
We were tough on it. And we would not have Russian warships and nuclear submarines surrounding Cuba 60 miles off our coast. You know that, right? For all of you people in Cuba, congratulations. You're now being protected by Russia. Congratulations. Can you imagine that the press, the fake news, those people, they don't even talk about it. We have nuclear submarines and 5 warships in Cuba, and they don't even talk about it.
AOC put an end to corruption without consequence for this court by filing articles of impeachment against Justices Thomas and Alito. While it's true that this particular House won't move them forward, we have an election in November, and that party in power can act. But no matter what, these articles and all of the justices' corruption actions are now a part of history. And she brought the receipts, so let's break it down.
We cannot ignore the most important material consequences of this court's unchecked corruption and its resulting influence: the suffering of the American people. We cannot ignore and pretend that this corruption is wholly unrelated to the pregnant Americans now suffering and bleeding out in emergency rooms under the court's unleashing of extreme abortion bans across the United States, which was a key political priority of these undisclosed benefactors and shadow organizations surrounding Alito and Thomas's misconduct. Nor can we ignore the millions of Americans now suffering hours-long wait times in the hot sun, often without water, just to cast a ballot, also a direct result of this corrupt court's gutting of the Voting Rights Act, allowing the closing of polling sites across the country. You see, neither these justices nor their shadowy benefactors have to answer to the parents of developmentally delayed children about their decision to gut the power of the EPA and the entire administrative state with it. But they do have to answer to us, the Congress, whom these people, the American people, have elected and entrusted to protect them, to serve them, and to defend the well-being of our democracy. Mr. Speaker, I am here today presenting these articles of impeachment not because I am a Democrat and not because I am blind to its odds in a Republican-led chamber. I present them because it is the right thing to do. And while our framers perhaps may not have envisioned someone like me in this seat, they absolutely did envision the necessity and value of the impeachment action upon which I seek to advance today.
Just minutes ago, we got breaking news that Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has officially filed articles of impeachment against Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. That comes just after Senators Sheldon Whitehouse and Ron Wyden made a formal request to DOJ. They want a special counsel appointed to criminally investigate Supreme Court Justice Thomas for accepting travel and the loan of a luxury car from wealthy donor friends.
What I can say is the experts that are in the room and myself and the CEOs that are in the room that are making these decisions, this new case seems to take that away from us and gives it to the court.
Exactly. A complete power grab that was led for many years, decades, by the Koch brothers, who have spent tens of millions of dollars in trying to overturn this Chevron doctrine in order to benefit their oil and gas and other industries that harm the environment. And you know what's interesting about this case, this Loper-Bright case, is that Clarence Thomas didn't recuse himself. He ruled on it. And yet Clarence Thomas took free private flights paid for by the Koch brothers, went to their events, raised money for them. This is all documented. And then after that, in 2020, Clarence Thomas just completely reversed his view of the Chevron doctrine. Funny, convenient. And yet he's ruling on this case. And what is going to happen is that this Trump Project 2025, just like Ms. Boebert said, is going to try to eliminate all environmental regulations. Donald Trump has offered to do that for the oil and gas company if their industry leaders can provide him with $1 billion to help in his campaign. But now that he has absolute immunity, if he becomes president, he can't get charged for that obvious criminal public corruption violation. And so he's going to try to implement Project 2025, eliminate the EPA, eliminate climate change from all regulations, eliminate the experts at the EPA and other agencies and put in his political lackeys, and then get to go to Clarence Thomas to determine whether or not what the executive agencies decided makes any sense. This is the destruction of our democracy.
According to the articles of impeachment, Justice Thomas committed high crimes and misdemeanor by failing to disclose gifts that he received from Harlan Crow. Harlan Crow serves on the board of the American Enterprise Institute, whose amicus briefs are regularly adopted by the court. So the undisclosed gifts that Justice Thomas received include, but are not limited to, $500,000 in private plane and yacht trips to Indonesia in 2019, a trip to New Zealand in 2013, a trip to Greece in 2007, trips to New York, Texas, and Connecticut. But it was not just luxury trips. Harlan Crow also made tuition payments in excess of $6,000 a month to 2 different private schools for his grandnephew while his grandnephew was in Justice Thomas's legal custody. Justice Thomas also failed to disclose the proceeds of the sale of a home and 2 vacant lots. He had 1/3 stake in this. In 2014, he sold them and they mysteriously appreciated because he valued them at $15,000 in 2019, but received $133,000 from Harlan Crow in 2014. Not only that, but his mother has continued to live in the home rent-free, and the home has been under construction, also paid by Harlan Crow and not disclosed by Justice Thomas. Now, what is the problem with this? As according to the articles of impeachment, a reasonable person would believe he used his office for his own private gain, or in simpler terms, that he sold the power that we gave him to Harlan Crow. And of course, it's not just Justice Thomas, but his wife that is at issue. The second article of impeachment against him is his refusal to recuse himself from cases that involve his wife's financial interests. Ginny Thomas has received hundreds of thousands of dollars from Liberty Consulting, which not only has ties to Harlan Crow, but Leonard Leo. Leonard Leo advises the Judicial Education Project, now called 85 Fund, which regularly files amicus briefs to the Supreme Court. The third article of impeachment against Clarence Thomas is his refusal to recuse himself from matters involving Ginny Thomas's legal interests, specifically those involving January 6th and the attempt to stop the peaceful transition of power. Not only did Justice Thomas not recuse himself in these cases, but at times he was the sole justice to vote in a way that benefited his wife. He voted to deny the release of texts regarding Trump's classified documents case. Was it because his wife was texting that same government official at the same time? Knowing what we know about Ginny's involvement in the election denial movement, that was very likely and a major reason why Clarence Thomas should have recused himself. In fact, Mrs. Thomas repeatedly urged then President Trump to illegally overturn the election results and advised Mr. Trump on his litigation strategy, including in an exchange of at least 29 text messages about the election with the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. The articles of impeachment include Ginny Thomas's own words to show how corrupt it was for Clarence Thomas not to recuse himself. She wrote, quote, "Do not concede. The majority knows Biden and the left is attempting the greatest heist of our history. Quote, save us from the left taking American down." On the issue of Sidney Powell, as the fact that she was his lead attorney on these matters, writing, "Don't let her and your assets be marginalized. Instead, help her be the lead and the face. Sounds like Sidney and her team are getting inundated with evidence of fraud. Make a plan, release the Kraken." This was how involved Ginny Thomas was. The articles of impeachment goes on to quote her some more. She writes to Mark Meadows, quote, "You need to buck up your team on the inside, Mark." She also coordinated communications between the White House, the president's personal lawyers, and others like Jared Kushner, writing, quote, "Just forwarded your Gmail and email I sent to Jared this AM. Sidney Powell and improved coordination will help the cavalry come and fraud exposed and America saved." And if that wasn't bad enough, she keeps writing, and she advises Trump to pursue his unlawful aims by any means necessary, writing, quote, "The most important thing you can realize right now is that there are no rules in war." End quote. This is the wife of a Supreme Court justice who did not recuse himself from any matter relating to the unlawful overthrow of the election results in 2020, having to do with the January 6th insurrection. None of them, despite the fact that she not only had a major role in it, she had a risk of civil and criminal liability herself, but he did not recuse himself. So this was yet another basis of the articles of impeachment. Justice Alito had his own set of articles of impeachment against him, alleging that he committed high crimes and misdemeanor for failing to recuse himself from election-related cases, despite the fact that he flew an upside-down flag, a symbol of the January 6th insurrection, outside his home, and had a separate flag outside his beach home that was also related to supporters of the overthrow of the government. Not only did he not recuse himself there, but there's a second article of impeachment against him for the fact that he didn't disclose his own gifts, specifically luxury trips paid by Robert Singer, a Republican donor who also had interest before the court, and Justice Alito did not recuse himself. Now, AOC led the charge and eloquently introduced the articles of impeachment on the House floor, but she wasn't the only signer on that document, and I'm going to give a shout out to the rest of the document signers. Specifically, it was Representative Jamal Bowman, who unfortunately just was primaried by a fellow Democrat and lost his race. Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas, Maxwell Frost of Florida, Barbara Lee of California, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Delia Ramirez of Illinois, and Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Bonnie Watson Coleman of New Jersey. Shout out to all of the Democrats who were willing and able to put down all of the actions of Justice Alito and Justice Thomas on paper for history, so that we will no longer have corruption without consequence for the Supreme Court.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.